Once Daniel found out about Sarah's affair with the New South Wales police officer, he understandably broke off their engagement, and it was after this event that Parkinson then started to make false allegations against Daniel. These included numerous allegations of domestic violence and rape, to the extent whereby Daniel had 32 charges put against him. The very sad thing about all this is that she was aided and abetted by her New South Wales police officer and also local police and AFP officers in Canberra. I think our biggest mistake was the initial AVO that was placed against Daniel. We had been told by an Inspector Hill at Queanbeyan Police Station that Daniel had been seen assaulting Sarah Jane. This wasn't the case at all. However, Hill said that he had numerous police officers that would give evidence. After speaking to Daniel's lawyer, the lawyer advised us that it would be better for Daniel to accept the AVO because then he would be seen to be conforming. It wasn't a case of him accepting these allegations made against him. Foolishly, we took that advice, and as a result, Daniel had an AVO against him. What this did do, though, was it gave a premise for Sarah Jane Parkinson to then start her tirade of false allegations. Then it just started. There was just one allegation after another. It was either domestic violence or verbal abuse. And then once she was able to get Daniel inside into the high max security prison, she then started making allegations against my then husband Ian and myself. This included us stalking her, making violent threats towards her, stealing items from her, breaking an entry into her home, and so on. It was just one allegation after another, and it was getting to the point where we basically couldn't keep up with so many allegations. The climax came in March 2014, where Parkinson alleged Daniel had violently raped her. What actually happened was Parkinson staged a rape scene. This included her banging her head against a brick wall so that she had a graze on her forehead, distributing a condom and its contents and packets around the home at Bonner, and also alleging that Daniel had hosed her down. However, when police arrived, she was completely dry, unruffled, and there was absolutely no evidence of a rape having taken place. She was taken to hospital. She was given a rape test, as I understand they call it, and there was absolutely no evidence, physical or otherwise, to say that she had been raped. This resulted in Daniel being arrested at home on the same day in horrific circumstances, and resulted in him being incarcerated for more than 4 months in a high max jail. What police completely overlooked and never asked was that Daniel had a complete, solid alibi. He simply was not at the Bonner property, and there was no way he could have been. However, this was completely overlooked, and once again the police weren't interested in facts or solid evidence. Forensics came to our home. They went to the Bonner property where the alleged rape had taken place, and they did not find any evidence whatsoever to support Sarah Jane Parkinson's allegation. The police weren't interested in making a correct investigation of this case. They just simply took Parkinson's word as gospel. When they came to our home, they acted completely unprofessionally. They did not want to know about the truth at all. They just simply would not listen. It didn't matter how many times we screamed at them that Daniel was at home. he couldn't have raped her, he wasn't there, and that the rape could not have taken place. They just were not interested. Once Daniel was in jail, Parkinson continued to make false allegations against family members, including my then husband Ian and myself. The allegations were becoming more and more bizarre and more frequent. It was at this stage that we met Detective Lisa Alexander. What had happened was Parkinson had basically planted an iPad at our property and then alleged that we had stolen that iPad by breaking into her home. Lisa Alexander was different from all the other police. She was professional. She questioned not only us, but she questioned Parkinson. And needless to say, Parkinson did not know that Lisa Alexander had placed a tracking device in Parkinson's car. This meant that Alexander could clearly see that Parkinson had actually visited our home and was able to plant the iPad on our property. From this, Alexander started questioning Parkinson, asking her more and more detail about these allegations against Daniel and also against the family. What Alexander found out was that basically Parkinson was lying. And as a result, she'd hurt a lot of people. She'd hurt my son, Daniel. She had torn a family apart. It cost us all our life savings. And ultimately, due to all the stress within the family, it ended my marriage as well. Lisa Alexander was able to gather enough evidence and facts to prove that Daniel had not undertaken any of these acts that Parkinson had alleged, and that included the false rape allegation. As a result, she was able to go to the Director of Prosecutions in the ACT, and she was able to get an immediate release for Daniel. The first that we found out that Daniel was released was a phone call from our lawyers. It was very late at night, and to receive a phone call from a lawyer that late at night, we thought that there could only be one of two things that had happened. Firstly, with some bizarre miracle, everything was going to be dropped against Daniel and that the case was going to become more positive for us. Or secondly, that something had actually happened to Daniel in prison. We knew that he was quite suicidal. We knew that he was at risk. And of course, when we received this late night phone call, it was very, very stressful and very worrying. Fortunately, it was good news. And we were told that Daniel was being released as soon as possible due to the work of Lisa Alexander and what she had found out about Parkinson. It took us 5 years to get Parkinson to trial and ultimately imprisoned for false allegations. This was mainly due to her knowing the system. She had worked in a New South Wales police station. She was aided and abetted by police friends, plus she still had her New South Wales police officer boyfriend. So she knew a lot about the system. She was able to work that to her advantage. So it took a very long time to get Parkinson to trial. And if it hadn't have been for Lisa Alexander looking at the facts and the evidence, which was there for everyone to have seen prior to this, if it hadn't been for Lisa putting that forward, then I dread to think what would have happened. So at long last, after 5 years, Parkinson was put on trial and ultimately she ended up in prison. Her sentence was 3 years and 1 month. She attempted to make an appeal against that and failed, and she's still in prison until early 2021. It was an extremely stressful time. We had the emotional side of things, the financial side, and of course during this period, you're still having to go to work. You're still having to pay your everyday bills. You're trying to be social with your friends. And it's altogether just too much stress. It's very hard to cope. And there are going to be people who don't believe you, and that in itself is very difficult to deal with as well. I think one thing that is really important for this country, if we want to see ourselves as a developed country and an educated country, and that is for our judiciary to really acknowledge that we need to do something about these women who make false accusations against men. The judiciary, the police, they all need to step up, get rid of any of the corruptness, get rid of your bad cops, and start looking at your cases objectively and with fact and with evidence. Because at the moment, that's not happening. It is very easy for a woman to make allegations against the men in this country, and it's very easy for that woman to get away with it. The result being is that you have a male wrongfully incarcerated, his life ruined, and that of his family as well. To the mums out there, I'm begging you to please look after your sons. If anything like this rears its head at all, try and stop it straight away. You need to do this. You need to show your son that you're there to support him, that you'll fight for him, because no one wants this to happen to their son. It's an horrendous experience and something that no one should go through. So I'm asking you, please, please look after your sons.